A chain of misfortune. Why me? Once, a series of events that occurred in the house of a wealthy man living in the city of Shravasti teaches us about the serious impact of inappropriate words and actions. This story, through the experiences of the monk Mahalaka, illustrates the power of each word and highlights the magnitude of its impact on the people around. It's also a story rich in lessons that make us think about the responsibility for the consequences of our choices in words and actions. The story begins with the events when Mahalaka was invited by the wealthy man. His actions and choices here trigger an unexpected chain reaction, affecting not only himself, but also having a significant impact on the people around him. Story. Long ago, in the city of Shravasti, there was a wealthy man who had amassed mountains of gold, silver, and treasures. He always invited monks for meals, entertaining them generously and never failing to make offerings. One day, two monks named Shariputra and Mahalaka came to the wealthy man's house upon invitation. Coincidentally, on that day, the sailors employed by the wealthy man had returned with rare gems collected from the sea. Not only that, but the wealthy man's wife had given birth to a boy on this day. And the king had also granted a village to the wealthy man, among other auspicious events. The entire household was in a state of great excitement. Shariputra and Mahalaka finished their meal, receiving the generous hospitality of the delighted wealthy man. After ensuring the meal was over, the wealthy man cleansed his body with water and sat before Shariputra. Shariputra prayed with gratitude to the wealthy man and then chanted,
"Truly, today is an auspicious day, with many blessings gathered. Wealth has increased and the heart is fulfilled, if one prays with devotion. May today's happiness continue endlessly without ceasing."
The wealthy man was moved by Shariputra's words and bowed his head. However, these events at the wealthy man's house cast a deep shadow on Mahalaka's heart. He reflected on Shariputra's words and deeply pondered the situation where he himself had not been greeted by the wealthy man. Witnessing how the song of gratitude towards the wealthy man brought lavish offerings to Shariputra, Mahalaka began to question his own worth and role as a monk.
Shariputra moved the wealthy man's heart with just a single song, and as a result, received gifts. But I had to return without receiving anything. What is this difference? It must be that song.
Mahalaka questioned himself. In his heart, a faint flame of jealousy began to burn alongside his respect for Shariputra. On the way back to the monastery, his heart was increasingly filled with a strong desire to learn that song.
Shariputra, won't you teach me the song you just chanted to the wealthy man?
His request to Shariputra was not born out of mere curiosity. It was imbued with a desire to elevate his own worth and status. For Mahalaka, this song was more than just words. It was something that could move people's hearts. It seemed like magic that had the power to change his own fate. Faced with Mahalaka's earnest plea, Shariputra maintained a stern silence. He sensed the hidden motives within Mahalaka and understood the gravity of teaching the true meaning and use of that song. Shariputra was internally conflicted about whether to teach it or not, because this song was not just words, but something whose true meaning was determined by the heart of the user.
Venerable one, I beg you, please bestow it upon me.
Mahalaka pleaded again and again, although Shariputra had not intended to teach. Moved by Mahalaka's earnestness, he finally imparted the song.
"Mahalaka, do not forget to use it according to the place and time,"
Shariputra said, emphasizing it many times. Mahalaka, having memorized the song, thought happily,
Indeed, this is a wonderful song, the more I chant it. Someday, I'll definitely use this song to receive many offerings.
Sometime later, Mahalaka was again invited to a meal by the same wealthy man. At the wealthy man's house, this time the sailors had encountered rough seas and returned with losses. Moreover, the child he loved so dearly that it wouldn't hurt even if put in his eye had died from a sudden illness. Bad things had piled up, and the wealthy man was grieving and lamenting. However, the wealthy man thought that listening to the monk's teachings would be a comfort. and he was waiting for Mahalaka, expecting that it might also bring hope for living. However, when Mahalaka arrived at the wealthy man's house, he proudly began to chant the song he had learned from Shariputra. Moreover, he showed no sign of noticing the wealthy man's feelings, and raised his voice even more.
May today's happiness continue endlessly without ceasing.
As expected, Mahalaka, who was thrown out of the wealthy man's house, was disturbed by the unreasonableness, and his thoughts were in confusion. He was walking, repeatedly questioning himself why he had to receive such treatment.
Did I make a mistake in the words of the song? No, that's not it. Why was the wealthy man angry?
Mahalaka was wondering if he had done something wrong to the wealthy man, or if he had used the magical song taught by Shariputra incorrectly. He was repeatedly thinking in his head. His thoughts continued until he entered the sesame field he was walking through. He was so preoccupied with his misfortune that he wasn't paying attention to where he was stepping. As a result, unfortunately, he trampled on the sesame in the field. Unconsciously, he had damaged the field, causing a lot of damage. When the guardian of the sesame field encountered this scene, he approached Mahalaka with an angry voice.
You! What are you doing acting like a monk?
Hearing the guardian's words, Mahalaka understood the situation he had caused, but received a blow from the guardian. Faced with the guardian's intense anger and blow, he couldn't say anything back and just hung his head with an expression full of helplessness. At this moment, Mahalaka was facing the consequences of his actions and others' anger towards them, keenly feeling his own thoughtlessness. This series of events became an opportunity for deep reflection for him, casting a heavy shadow on his heart.
I'm sorry, I didn't notice. Please forgive me.
Having finally calmed the guardian's anger, Mahalaka started walking dejectedly. After walking for a while, he came across a field where harvested wheat was piled up in mountains. Mahalaka, without thinking, walked around the wheat pile to the left. The owner of the field, who was watching this, hit him hard with a stick.
Why are you hitting me? I haven't done anything wrong, have I?
Didn't you just walk around this wheat pile to the left? You being a monk must know the old saying. If you don't know, I'll tell you, so remember it well. It said, walk around the wheat pile to the right and chant great harvest for a good harvest, to the left for a terrible harvest. You walk to the left without a care. It's truly outrageous. That's why I hit you.
The field owner answered, seething with anger. Mahalaka, dragging his feet and touching his beaten back, muttered,
What an unlucky day this is. Why am I getting beaten so much?
As he walked, he came to a cemetery. A funeral was taking place, with the bereaved family crying as they buried the deceased. Determined not to fail this time, he walked around the grave to the right as instructed by the field owner and said,
Great harvest, great harvest.
The bereaved family and attendees were shocked by Mahalaka's words and actions. They were in deep sorrow and felt anger at the inappropriate words spoken by him, a monk. Their anger quickly turned into action. They surrounded Mahalaka and raised their hands to him in anger. Mahalaka's words at the funeral lacked respect for the lost life and deeply hurt the hearts of the attendees.
What are you thinking, saying such things at a place like this, despite being a monk? Why don't you show sincere condolences in the face of someone's death?
One of the bereaved family members criticized. They were angered by Mahalaka's words and felt that he had forgotten his position as a monk. Mahalaka, keenly aware of his mistake through their words, apologized deeply. He sincerely reflected and vowed to treat the attendees with respect and caution. He tearfully begged for forgiveness, and when their anger finally subsided, he staggered and began walking again. However, soon after, he encountered a wedding procession and repeated his mistaken behavior again. Mahalaka remembered the words he had learned at the cemetery and uttered them exactly at the wedding.
My deepest condolences on this occasion.
As a result, he faced another shocked and angry reaction and was severely criticized by the wedding attendees. He was subjected to intense criticism on the spot and suffered a great blow both mentally and physically. Through this, Mahalaka came to keenly realize the seriousness of his actions and the importance of the power of words. Blood finally spurted from various parts of Mahalaka's head and body, and his consciousness was becoming hazy. He barely managed to escape the scene, but naturally began to withdraw and avoid people when he saw them. As he walked further, he encountered a hunter catching prey. Frightened, Mahalaka instinctively tried to dodge. At that moment, his body touched a nearby net, making a loud noise, causing the prey to escape. The hunter angrily struck at Mahalaka.
What on earth have you done?
Please forgive me. I'm very sorry for what I've done. To tell the truth, I've been beaten many times before coming here. I'm almost going crazy from being kicked around. My feet were unsteady and my body touched the net. I didn't do it with any ill intentions.
Is that so? That's unfortunate. If your feet are that unsteady, you'd better crawl on the ground.
Mahalaka obeyed the hunter's words and decided to crawl on the ground. Then he encountered someone doing laundry. Seeing an unknown man crawling on the ground, he assumed he was a thief and hit Mahalaka's back hard with a stick.
What on earth have I done? Isn't this too much? Why are you hitting me with a stick?
He managed to say just that much, gasping for breath before losing consciousness. After a while, when Mahalaka regained consciousness, he somehow managed to reach Jetavana Monastery and told the monks everything.
I've had such a terrible day. Just because I chanted the song I learned from Shariputra, everyone I met beat or hit me. Thanks to that, my lifespan has probably shortened. I don't understand at all what's going on.
The monks who heard Mahalaka's words took him to Buddha and asked for an explanation.
Mahalaka and all my disciples, listen well to what I'm about to say.
Saying this, Buddha looked around at his disciples and began to speak. Long ago, in a certain country, there was a beautiful and intelligent princess, but she was suffering from an unknown serious illness. All the physicians in the country tried to treat her, but her condition did not improve at all. The royal palace sincerely wished for her recovery and tried various methods, but nothing was effective. One day, a renowned fortune teller visited the palace, and after examining the princess's illness, he made a strange suggestion.
Unless you go to the cemetery to pray and transfer the illness to a fresh corpse, this cannot be cured.
He said. The princess and her entourage, believing the fortune teller's words and resolved to try anything to cure the illness, headed to the cemetery. Around that time, two merchants were traveling. On their way to sell goods in a distant country, they happened to encounter the princess's entourage. Overwhelmed by the solemn appearance of the princess's entourage and the strict guard, the merchants felt that something big was happening. Fearing that they might have done something wrong, they quickly hid in a nearby cemetery. However, one of the merchants was overwhelmed by fear and inadvertently let out a scream.
I'm scared.
Hearing this voice, the princess's attendants realized that someone was hiding in the cemetery and immediately began searching. They caught the merchant who screamed and cut off his ears and nose.
Oh, why me?
This punishment was based on the country's law, a severe penalty for those who caused inauspicious events. Seeing this, the other merchant was paralyzed with fear and had no choice but to pretend to be dead. He lay quietly like a corpse, trembling, worrying about what was happening and his own fate. The princess had heard that a corpse that hadn't yet decomposed would be more effective, so she had her attendants examine the body. Since this man was merely pretending to be dead, he naturally showed no signs of decomposition. The attendants, believing this man had just died, began to cleanse his body with poppy powder. However, as they were cleansing the body, some of the powder got into the man's nose. The man tried to endure it, but eventually couldn't hold it anymore and let out a big sneeze, standing up. The princess's attendants felt deep fear at the events in the cemetery. They witnessed a man they thought was dead suddenly moving and suspected the intervention of supernatural forces. The phenomenon of a corpse moving was the epitome of terror for them. They could only think it was the work of a demon possessing the corpse. Fearing it was an omen that something inauspicious would happen, they hurriedly fled. The cemetery gate closed with a loud sound, and they rushed to a safe place. On the other hand, the princess, believing the fortune teller's words, clung to the man as her only hope for curing her illness. Her action came from deep desperation and a strong desire for healing. The princess caught the man and asked him how to transfer the illness. The man, confused by the sudden turn of events, desperately tried to explain why he had ended up in this situation. Realizing the man was alive, the princess was momentarily confused. But she was convinced that she needed this man to cure her illness. However, the man was just a traveling merchant and did not possess any supernatural powers. The princess left the cemetery with the man, and on the way back to the castle, she kept thinking about how to cure her illness. The man told the princess about the unfortunate events that had happened to him. She listened to his words and sympathized with his misfortune. The two headed towards the castle, influencing each other as if bound by a strange thread of fate. Realizing there was no way out of this situation, the man explained everything. After hearing this, the princess took the man back to the castle, had him wait outside the gate, entered the castle, and told the king everything. However, the king refused to believe it.
You're being deceived by a demon. I'll get rid of it.
Saying this, the king led his soldiers and opened the castle gate. However, as soon as he saw the man, he realized he wasn't a demon and finally understood the princess's story. Suddenly, they realized that amidst all the commotion, the princess's illness had completely healed. The king said joyfully to the man,
You have done a good thing. It's great that the princess's illness has been cured. Please take the princess as your wife.
The merchant was both surprised and delighted by the king's words. Buddha, imbuing his words with deep meaning, continued to speak to Mahalika.
The one who married the princess at that time is now Shariputra. He took appropriate action at the right time and was able to win the princess's heart. On the other hand, the one who had his ears and nose cut off was you, Mahalika. This shows how intricately karma is intertwined. One always needs to be aware of how one's words and actions will affect the future. When teaching others or chanting songs, it is crucial to accurately assess the situation and act accordingly. In particular, one must be sensitive to people's feelings and the immediate situation. One must fully understand people's worries, sorrows, and joys. If one does not act appropriately based on this understanding, it will result in making a great mistake. Mahalika, you should have learned many things from this experience. Use this experience as nourishment, and from now on, be sure to think carefully and act with caution. By doing so, you will become a wiser monk and be able to spread the correct teachings to many people.
Thus, Buddha compassionately admonished Mahalaka and gave him a profound lesson. This story demonstrates the importance of appropriate speech and action, and the importance of understanding and accepting the complexity of cause and effect. Afterward, the main lessons that can be learned from this story are: because inappropriate words and actions can have unexpected negative consequences, we should always act carefully and choose our words wisely. In the story, Mahalika, due to his words and actions at the wealthy man's house and his subsequent behavior, faces various misfortunes and difficulties. His experiences emphasize the following points. First is understanding the context. In any situation, it's important to understand the context and behave appropriately. Especially in public situations or scenes involving others' emotions, the impact of words and actions can be significant. Second is the power of words. Words have powerful influence. If used positively, they can encourage others. If used inappropriately, they can hurt people or cause misunderstandings. Third is the importance of self-awareness. It's important to be aware of the impact our words and actions have on those around us, and act accordingly. By reflecting on our own actions and learning from the results, we can make better judgments. Fourth is emotional control. By not being swayed by emotions and maintaining calmness, we can avoid inappropriate reactions. Especially when strong emotions like anger or disappointment are at work, careful action is required. Overall, this story teaches us to take responsibility for the consequences of our words and actions, and the importance of acting appropriately while considering the situation. It also shows the importance of respecting others' feelings and reactions, and treating them with consideration.